That's accepted, and I should allow Senator Patrick just to move on. I was just trying to clarify those two things, but perhaps the best way for us to deal with this is to let Senator Patrick get right through his line of questioning, and you might make some notes and we can come back on these points, because I think that's where you'll find some involvement from the balance of us. It'd be great. Sorry, Senator.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. No, you were being helpful. Thank you. So somewhere between the 1st of December and the 7th of December, in fact, it sounds like before that, you were of the view that the chief pilot wasn't authorised to fly. Is that correct?
I think you're referring to the Czech pilot.
Czech pilot, sorry.
We discovered he wasn't authorised to fly. I'm not sure at the exact time, 5 or so days before the Dominic flight.
Okay, and that caused you, Mr. Carmody, to have a concern as to their safety.
Well, what it caused me to think about, Senator, is what are lead indicators here? This organisation put up somebody. We've had a long discussion about Mr. James's flight and being proficient, and this went on for a month about how we organise how to do a flight. Came up here in estimates as well. We turn up and the person they put up to check him is not qualified and they don't know. Lead indicator number 1. We go back and have a look at the rest of their pilots. Lead indicator number 2, we find that lots of them are not qualified.
But
That's
they're not qualified
about.
because they were checked by the same pilot.
There's a whole litany of people who were not qualified in various ways.
On the basis they were not checked, they were checked by that particular pilot, is my understanding. That's the cascading effect. And indeed, some of those pilots...
Well, it may be helpful here,
We'll let you go
because I see a contest here. It may be helpful, if Mr Carmody, if you were to particularise by name and circumstance as to why you say they weren't qualified. Is that all right with you, Senator?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chair.
Let's just get that laid down and we'll know what we're dealing with. So you don't necessarily have to give their names, if I don't think. Is there any particular need for their names at this stage?
I don't think so.
So you can call them Pilot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Mr Crawford. You look like you're poised and ready to go there.
We can go through them in detail. Do you want... I can do them. I'm ready to go.
I'll do it. Graham Crawford, Group Executive Manager, Aviation. Just a couple of key facts. Basically, 8 out of 9 of the pilots at FalconAir were not compliant with their own operations.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to interrupt you because I know how these things go. Let's just go down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And if you tell us that number 2 is the same circumstances as number 1, we'll do the detail.
Chair, I can take that because I've got them lined up here. So why don't I do that? And I'll just run quickly through them. The first pilot who was going to be actually conducting the check, who was nominated. So he conducted a successful instrument proficiency check and OPIS, an operational proficiency check, on the 31st of August 2017. It would appear he had not conducted any other check before that date since the middle of 2016. On the assumption he was well out of the checking and training regime means requires you to conduct 2 flights a year.
2 flights a year, not closer than
for
4
yourself.
months apart.
Not closer for you to be checked and tested.
Not closer than 4 months apart.
Okay, so on the 31st of the 8th, he was checked and tested, and we ticked that.
Yep.
But preceding that, when was the previous one?
Before June 2016.
An OPC is a
Operational proficiency.
and that's a significant test in a simulator somewhere, isn't it?
It is.
So let me get this right. So on August 17, he's properly checked and tested in a simulator, we'll tick that.
Yep.
In June 16, he was properly tested and checked in a simulator, so we'll tick that.
Yep.
What you're suggesting is that there were at least 2 events in between those 2 that he should have been checked and tested in a simulator and did not.
That's essentially correct. As we work back all the way through this. Okay.
Is there anything else with...
Didn't he do a check but in the wrong aircraft?
Malcolm,
He did a check late 16 in, I believe it was a Duchess, which is a small piston engine twin, and then went back to flying duties after a medical event. He had a period away from a medical issue and then came back to flying duties without being rechecked to line in a company aircraft with a...
Well, in late 17, that event where he was checked and tested in the piston aircraft, Does that qualify as one of these two ticks? Is
No.
that a
No,
third
it
tick?
doesn't. It does not. It doesn't.
Wrong type.
Doesn't qualify in accordance with their ops manual.
It's
very specific.
It's not done in a company aircraft. It wasn't a company check. It didn't cover the parameters of a company check, and it was an aircraft totally different.
He'd previously done a check in an aircraft in another company in the same aircraft, hadn't he? So my understanding was he was of the view that he could. It was a mistake. He accepts that was a mistake. But in his previous company, he had checked in a Duchess, and that was legal because the company had a Duchess.
The issue, Senator, is it's not compliant with FalconAir's operations.
No, I
manual.
understand that. What I'm suggesting is this is not it wasn't a deliberate action. The pilot, having checked himself in a Duchess at his previous company, went and did the same thing in the new company that he was working for, FalconAir, and so he's made a mistake. That's clear.
Made a mistake.
Okay.
Whether it was a mistake or it was deliberate, I don't
Sure.
know.
Don't know. And that's part of the. That is part of the challenge in this process.
Sure.
According to the company, a little bit of paperwork.
Sure.
Just a little bit of
I
paperwork.
do know that he was well aware of the legal requirements because I'd had interactions with him in the previous company and this one where we'd discussed it as part of proficiency checks.
Okay.
And if I might add, Senator, if it were a mistake, all CASA expected was that he should fix the mistake.
Yeah, let's come back to it because I've got a
Yeah.
series of questions. I don't want to interrupt Senator Patrick. So let's go to person number 2. Let's list this down.
The next person, I'm just trying to work out how to mention him without mentioning. It's the chief pilot. So the next person is the chief pilot. He doesn't appear to have complied with the requirements of their own training and checking training and checking manual. And he doesn't appear to have complied with the obligation to ensure that tests and checks are conducted in accordance with both the manual.
So that's the indictment.
Yep,
Just
that's
that
the
one thing that he
And-
did not.
He's responsible for the check and training system.
No, I appreciate that.
He's
So
fund-
his indictment is he's responsible for the check and training system.
He's not checked
No,
himself.
No, I appreciate that. There's a manual that would lay that out for him with
Yep.
acceptable processes, and he failed to apply the terms of that manual to person number 1 because of person number 1's failure on 2 other occasions to be checked and tested. Is that right?
And he failed to apply. He's the head of checking and training. He failed to apply it through the whole system, including person one. Including person one.
But certainly with number 1.
Yep, including person one.
Yep. And then, is it a cascade effect then that because he didn't do it with 1, then it contaminates 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? Is that the indictment on that?
Not with number
No,
two.
not with number 2.
Right,
But
so-
but the indictment with number 2 is that he's fundamentally responsible for this system.
I accept that, we accept that, but I want to know any other misdemeanours on 2, that's it?
Yes,
That's it.
Okay. Number 3?
Number 3 appears to have conducted his last instrument proficiency check outside of the regulations. So therefore, it wasn't a valid check for the purposes of meeting the requirements set out in FalconAir's training and checking manual, compliance of which is required by the regulations. In this instance, his last valid check under our Regulation 217 would appear to have been on the 12th of December 2016, more than 12 months old.
And how frequent were they supposed to do that?
Same, so 2 checks.
Two checks per
Two
year.
checks per year, no more than, must be more than 4 months apart.
So he done 1 check in the year of 16,
Yep, the end of 16.
the end of 16,
So 2000.
and then
Doesn't appear to have done any in 2017.
nothing in 2017.
And again, Chair, if I may, just as we explain them as we work through them, you've got an instrument proficiency check and you've got an operational proficiency check. And they're different checks, but they're part of the same checking and training system.
Yes. He's guilty on the instrument proficiency, according to the
Well,
indictment.
he's guilty on both because he doesn't seem to have done an OPC at all. He's done an instrument proficiency check.
And what's an OPC?
An operational check. So that's the type of check, I think my colleagues would explain it better than I would, but which would create varying situations for you when you're flying. The weather's just turned, planned a diversion, something's gone wrong. Is that right, Mel?
Yes.
That's a supervised event. Someone's oversighted.
Yes, absolutely.
It's
Okay,
done
so
by-
he's failed to do it. No one's
Yeah.
oversighted it. So he's unrelated to 2 and 1, except that 2 ought to have had an audit within the organisation to have identified those 2 things.
He should have planned those flights.
Just hear my question.
So would he
What's
being
the
number
sun
1?
come up
Number
here?
2.
Number 2, what